Whispered wind slithers between temple ruins and thistle bones. In the heart of silence, beneath jungle rot and volcanic ash, you breathe the name no tongue should shape. Quetzalcoatl, your lips do not move. The sound hums within your teeth, a vibration older than memory. You are not here, not quite. More shadow than flesh, more listener than pilgrim. A scent of burnt copal stirs. You step barefoot upon obsidian dust, each grain a mirror, each reflection not your own. For you rise as a city once etched in gold and skylight, now swallowed by centuries. Teotihuacan, not the name it gave itself, but the name given by the ones who came later, baffled by its ghosts. The place where gods were born, they called it. But you suspect the truth is colder. It is where one god unmade himself. You enter through a gate no longer visible to the living. Its arch is imagined now, existing only in wind and story. There the murals begin. Serpents feathered with fire and sky twist around crumbling walls. Eyes of jade, tongues of smoke, each coil a prayer, painted by hands that never trembled. You trace them with your fingers and feel heat, though the stone is cold. Every feather here once knew breath. Every scale once sung into being. A shadow crosses above. No bird. The wind changes direction. The air feels intentional. You descend the avenue of the dead. The stones below you shift, not physically, but in history. Here, kings walked without names, and people bowed not to faces, but to presences. No statue of Quetzalcoatl ever captured him whole. Some showed him as a man, bearded and pale. Others as a serpent with wings wider than a cathedral. Still others depicted only a swirl, the movement of air. The priests told the people, "He comes in many forms, but always in the breath before creation." And you now feel that breath. It curls at your nape. You pause before the temple of the Feathered Serpent. Not the largest, but the most unsettling. Sphacae swarms with open mouths. Rows of fangs, wrapped in carved feathers. Eyes carved so deeply they never lose their wetness. And in between them, smaller, less ornate, the goggle-eyed face of Tlaloc. The rain god, placed alongside the serpent in a juxtaposition no scholar has explained. Some whisper this temple was built during a schism, a time when gods warred with symbols. Others suggest it was not for Quetzalcoatl at all, but something older, something the priests tried to overwrite. The mystery has never been solved. You step closer. You see the cracks where prayers were forced between stone teeth. Obsidian blades were once driven into these gaps, not for sacrifice, but for sound. The blood was incidental. It was the vibration that mattered. A priest would scream into the wind and the temple would echo it, shape it, send it skyward, hoping the god would listen. One fragment of a glyph found here suggests a forbidden phrase once uttered only in moonless hours. You do not pray to the serpent. You remember what you were before it. No priest ever survived speaking it twice. You place your palm on the stone. It hums. Not sound, not memory, something else. A recognition. The jungle around you pulls back as if held at bay by ancient covenant. Even time feels hesitant here. You hear breathing that is not your own. And you recall the prophecy hidden in codices now forbidden to sight. He shall rise not in fire or blood, but in the forgetting. When all tongues lose his name, he returns in silence. A flicker in your peripheral vision. A feather, green and gold, floats down and lands on the obsidian step. You pick it up. It is warm, unwithered. It should not exist. Yet here it is. You lift your eyes. The temple remains as still as ever, but its shadows have grown longer. They now reach toward you. Your journey has begun, not toward discovery, but erasure. To understand Quetzalcoatl is to unravel. Not him, but yourself. You are not an observer here. You are the offering. You are the question. Whispers begin to curl in your ears. Unfamiliar words that still feel native to your lungs. You realize the air has grown thick. Time bends, just slightly. Just enough to let the ancient seep through the cracks of now. You hear a voice, neither male nor female, neither old nor young. You've come to hear the story. But the story hears you too. You must move deeper. The breath has been drawn. The feather has begun to fall. Before you continue, the air beckons your attention. If this whisper stirred you, let your voice echo in the comments. If you walk with vanished gods, then subscribe to remember. If your breath met a forgotten wind, like this story, you are no longer alone in the archive. This is the tale of Quetzalcoatl, the serpent god that vanished. Now, let's get started with today's story. You walk the path where fire once fed the heavens. The avenue of the dead stretches ahead like a wound in the earth, lined with memories too old to name. Your footsteps echo in silence, not because the city is quiet, but because it listens. Every step awakens something half asleep beneath the soil, something that remembers when this place breathed more than dust. Teotihuacan, a city built not by a single people, but by echoes of empires. Otomi, Zapotec, Maya, Nahua, a convergence of civilizations, or a convergence of dreams. The deeper you go, the more the walls seem to warp. Murals shift when you don't look directly at them. Serpent coils clockwise, then counter, then vanishes entirely. You squint, but the image is gone, replaced by sky. Above you, the pyramid of the sun looms. It casts a shadow that feels sentient. Scholars argue over who built it, why its corridors do not align with the solstices precisely, and why every measurement seems to carry numerical riddles no calendar answers. But the most troubling debate lies in the identity of the god it honored. No inscription names him directly. Yet the iconography, feathers, serpents, wind, hints, Quetzalcoatl, some dare whisper, but others say it was a precursor, a proto-god, a sky-faced man, whose features bled into later deities, his true name lost, or deliberately erased. The murals in the Temple of Agriculture nearby depict strange scenes: serpents vomiting maize, human figures floating upside down in the sky, trees with roots in the heavens, and crowns beneath the earth. These images defy linear reading, like sacred texts, meant not to inform, but to disorient. Some believe they were visual spells, crafted by artisans who never spoke aloud the prayers they painted. Others believe these were snapshots of visions induced by ritual hallucinogens, mushrooms, morning glories, or crushed beetles, mixed with obsidian ash and inhaled before dawn. One controversial fresco, known only from a single sketch drawn by a conquistador who died mysteriously weeks later, showed a humanoid figure seated in the sky, arms outstretched, with a serpent coiled around his torso and mouth open, but no tongue. The sketch notes a Nahua phrase scrawled beneath. In silence he creates. The mural itself was gone when scholars arrived. Wall had been scraped clean, as though the city itself rejected remembrance. You reach a staircase descending beneath the Pyramid of the Moon. Here, archaeologists unearthed over 100 skeletons, all bound, all decapitated, arranged in radial patterns like spokes of a wheel. They called it a ritual of power, a sacrifice to maintain order. But one bone fragment bore a carving no one has explained, a spiral swallowing a feather. It was not a glyph known to any Mesoamerican script. Some said it resembled the golden ratio. Others saw a wind map, but one monk translated it thus: he ate himself to escape. They say he lost his faith the next day and burned his own manuscripts. You descend lanternless. The deeper you go, the more the air changes. It thickens. You feel your pulse in your gums. Then you feel something else. Absence. Not silence. Not fear. A vacuum. Spiritual pull, like standing at the edge of belief and looking over. This was once the Axis Mundi, the center of the cosmos. Now it is hollow. And the god who once rose here is missing. There is a tablet sealed behind glass in a Mexico City archive that no one agrees upon. It shows a serpent with a human face, shedding its skin into a cloak of feathers, ascending not into the sky, but into a mirror. The sky ripples inwards. Beneath the tablet are 6 glyphs, undeciphered. One researcher died suddenly while translating. Another reported visions of serpents in her bed. Third never returned from the archive. The file remains incomplete. The translation cut off at a single phrase. He is not gone. He is dreaming. And if he dreams, then you are now in it. The city narrows. The murals close in. The pyramids seem to breathe. The sun overhead feels too still, not shining, but watching. You kneel and place your palm upon a shard of obsidian embedded in the earth. You see nothing at first, only your own eye, then a flicker, a man with feathers instead of hair, serpent with eyes like suns, a wind moving against time, a voice not spoken aloud. Do you remember me yet? You recoil, but the shard does not leave your skin. The city is no longer still. You hear drums far off. No, not drums, hearts. Something ancient is waking, or remembering that it is supposed to wake. You stand. The murals twist again. Now they depict you. You look up, and the sky blinks. You descend into the cracked chamber beneath the temple of the Feathered Serpent. Your footsteps muffled by centuries of dust and skin-shed memory. The passage narrows, and each breath feels harder to earn. You are not alone. Not quite. Reflections shimmer across the obsidian fragments embedded in the walls. Not mirrors, not glass. These stones were sharpened not to cut flesh, but time. You try not to look into them, but they draw you in. Each shard a window into a moment that may never have happened. A boy screaming with a feathered mask, serpent uncoiling from a priest's mouth, a sun swallowing itself. The ritual is lost, officially. The annals say no one remembers the full form of the Quetzalcoatl, the night mirror, right? Yet the whispers remain. A forbidden practice once performed beneath eclipsed suns and moonless silence before a god-shaped mirror. Not to see visions, not to summon anything, but to erase. Those who gazed long enough into polished obsidian were said to have vanished, not bodily but spiritually, their names forgotten, their genealogies unspoken, not cursed but unremembered, gone as if unborn. In your palm, a shard from the path above still pulses faintly. It vibrates like a memory too eager to return. You hold it before your face, and for a moment, you do not see yourself. You see a figure cloaked in serpents, mouth open wide, yet no scream escapes. Behind him, the sun crumbles like ash. You blink. You are yourself again, or so you hope. One codex, hidden in the binding of a colonial lyra hymnal, speaks of the Teotihuacan, a secret calendar marked by sacrifices, not of bodies, but of futures. 13 dates across the span of a century when chosen seers would peer into sacred obsidian to ensure. Quetzalcoatl's silence remained intact. They were not meant to awaken him, but to keep him dreaming. Each seer, after the rite, ceased speaking. Not from fear, from completeness. They had no further need for words. You reach the chamber's heart, a circular room whose walls shimmer with obsidian plates. In its center, a single basin of dark water remains still, untouched by insects or time. A stone serpent coils around it, mouth agape, tongue shaped like a blade. You kneel beside it. The water reflects nothing. There's no ceiling, no light, no you. Only void. You lean closer. Your breath does not disturb it. Then something changes. No, not in the water, but in your own breath. You exhale, and the sound is wrong. Not air, but a whisper, a name. Not one you know, but one you've always feared. ... EHECATL ... ... Double quotes. The wind form of Quetzalcoatl. And in that moment, the water shifts. The water shifts. You see a sun with open eyes. It weeps smoke. Beneath it, priests in feathered robes strike obsidian blades against one another, sparks falling like blood. They do not cut, they create sound. From the sound, a wind rises. The wind spirals, becoming a serpent. The serpent opens its mouth, and the vision folds inward, collapsing into itself like dying flame. The basin stills. Behind you, footsteps. You turn. No one. But the obsidian wall holds a reflection, not of you, of the same cloaked figure you saw before, feathered masked, hollow-eyed. It raises a hand. You mirror it without thinking. As your fingers rise, a ringing builds in your ear, pressure, low and ancient. Your lungs begin to ache, not from lack of air, from remembering too much. The forbidden belief, never written, but often dreamt, speaks of Quetzalcoatl as not merely a god of wind and wisdom, but as the memory of the world itself, not its past. And that memory, when reflected wrongly, collapses the structure of truth. It is said he vanished not from death but from the mirror, a cosmic accident or divine choice. No one agrees. One monk wrote, in a letter burned before it could be archived, that Quetzalcoatl entered the obsidian to save us from what he saw becoming. Another wrote he was tricked by reflections of hope. The room is darker now. You are certain no clouds passed above, yet your light dims. You look back into the basin. The water is gone. In its place, a sunstone spinning. Too fast. Faster. Until its spiral becomes a tunnel. And you hear it, a breath that is not yours, drawn sharp, vast, as if the world itself is inhaling. You drop the shard, but your hand still reflects in the wall. Except it is no longer your hand. You flee the chamber. Outside, the sun blazes too bright. It burns without warmth. You gasp and the air tastes of ash. The serpent god has not vanished. You've only begun to reflect him. You emerge from the mirror chamber gasping, lungs raw as if you had inhaled centuries. The city outside blurs around the edges. Walls ripple. Stones breathe. Above the sky is a canvas of unmoving clouds, too white to still. You stagger along the edge of a forgotten plaza, where wind once chanted in sacred tones. Your ears ring not with noise, but with absence, the memory of sound. You have seen into the mirror, but something deeper now calls. Not from above, but from beneath your ribs. You do not know the road to Cholula, yet your feet take you there. They remember, or rather, they obey. The largest pyramid by volume on earth lies buried beneath a hill crowned with a church. Tourists climb it unknowing, but below, beneath layers of adobe of blood, of years, the feathered serpent once dreamed through priests who refused the knife. Cholula, the city of flutes of forbidden music. You find its old path covered in weeds and hymns no longer sung. Beneath the hill, tunnels remain, once ventilation shafts, now arteries. You crawl through one, the air growing sweet with old incense. And there, in a chamber the world forgot to measure, lies a flute carved from human bone, wrapped in serpent feathers. You touch it, it hums. Centuries ago, a sect of heretical priests, known only as the Breath Keepers, broke from the bloodthirsty dogma of empire. While others fed Quetzalcoatl with open chests and rivers of scarlet, the Breath Keepers whispered a different truth, that he demanded no heart, only breath. The act of inhalation to them was prayer. To exhale was offering. They taught that true worship required surrender not of flesh, but of ego, a dissolving into wind. Their rituals involved rhythmic breathing, deep trance, and bone flutes carved from the willing dead. They played not for sound, but for vibration. The walls sang. The gods listened. It was heresy. The empire could not allow it. Priests from the central cult declared the Breath Keepers corrupt, anti-cosmic, blasphemous. Soldiers came. The tunnels were sealed. Flutes shattered, or so they claimed. And yet here one lies untouched. You lift it. It is lighter than bone should be. You bring it to your lips, and before sound emerges, memory does. You are not yourself. You are one of them. Eyes closed, surrounded by flame and rhythm. Breathing in the dark with others, heart slowed, mind unhooked. A voice in the air, not outside you, not inside, between. It says, wind does not kill. It remembers. You breathe out. The flute sounds. Only once. And the tunnel shifts, not collapses. Shifts, as if it sighs. A stone falls behind you, closing the path back. Another opens ahead. You move forward. The wind follows, not in gusts, but in pulses. Your skin begins to tingle, not from cold, from recognition. You are being watched by something without eyes, something that breathes only when you do. You reach a chamber carved with symbols forbidden in all codices. Eyes with no pupils, lungs with feathers for bronchi, serpents that coil around no prey but themselves. And at the center, a skeleton in a seated pose. No knife wounds. No skull fracture, just open hands. A shattered flute between them and a single phrase carved above in old glyphs. You listen too deeply. Close your eyes. Try to remember why you came here. But you don't. You only remember the breath. The one you drew when you first heard his name. The one that never left your lungs. An unsolved mystery haunts the theologians of Quetzalcoatl's lore. If he abhorred sacrifice, why did empires insist upon it in his name? Some suggest a corruption. Others say the god they worshipped was not him, but his reflection, a darker echo shaped by politics and fear. God invented to silence the breath-keeper's wind. You wonder which version is awake now? A wind begins, not outside. Within the stone, chamber sings with breath not your own. Feel your lungs move involuntarily. Breathing in when you try to exhale. Exhaling when you try to scream. Flute vibrates, still in your hand, though you dropped it. And from the darkness a figure steps, robed in feathers, eyes closed, mouth open, but no voice. Only breath, rhythmic, eternal. He raises his hands, and so do you. The ritual was never about music. It was about remembering how to breathe the way he did. Before names, before mirrors, before blood, you exhale. The wind carries you upward, but no one sees your ascent. You are beneath the church, beneath the pyramid, beneath history itself. Above you, worship continues in the name of saints and salvation, but here, in the sacred lung of the earth, breath remains unbroken. You do not walk out of the tunnel. It opens you like a rib cage and exhales you into morning. A pale sky greets you, smeared with the bruised hues of rain not yet fallen. You return to Teotihuacan days later, or perhaps years, or never. The concept of time thins here, like candle smoke. The great serpent temple stands unmoved, yet different. The stones no longer merely endure, they weep. You witness it firsthand. A slow, glistening drip leaks from the carved eyes of the feathered serpent heads. It is not water, not quite. The substance resists sunlight, clings to stone, and rolls not downward, but sideways along the ridges of carvings, as though choosing its path. A single drop lands on your skin. It hisses, not with heat, with memory. You see a flash. A high priest, centuries ago, cloaked in green feathers, kneeling beneath a sky choked with eclipsed stars. Around him, hundreds of followers wait in absolute stillness. It is the third night without sunrise. Fear thickens in the throat. The priest stands, raises a bowl filled not with blood, but with crushed turquoise and moon water. He speaks. If he dreams of light. Let us give him none. The ritual, you understand now, was not to awaken Quetzalcoatl, but to shelter him. For even a god of wind can be burned by the sun. The eyes of the temple weep more. Historians claim this rain is a capillary action of mineral moisture through limestone, a natural seepage. But locals whisper otherwise. They say the tears began on a specific day, July 13th, 1971. The morning after a team of archaeologists unearthed a sealed chamber containing nothing but mirrors. 17 polished obsidian circles, no inscriptions, no offerings, just mirrors. Facing one another, the team's notes never published. 2 of them vanished. The last never left the site, and now wanders the plazas whispering to pigeons. He says they remember, that their coups are messages in disguise. You kneel beside a weeping serpent head and study its face. Each carved line seems deeper than chisel could reach, more like scars than art. And in the eyes, tiny glyphs swirl. It's unreadable to modern script. One resembles a feather swallowed by a droplet. Another resembles a spiral dissolving into wind. You trace them, and the stone pulses. A sound vibrates the air, so low it tickles bone. It repeats, not language, breath and rhythm. You turn, and the rain halts. Every serpent face on the wall closes its stone mouth. The sun bursts overhead too quickly, too soon, as if forced into place. And for a moment, just one, the temple casts no shadow. The mystery of the shadowless sun has no canonical explanation. Some attribute it to a trick of alignment. Others call it illusion. But in Nahua lore, there is a warning. When the light stands without echo, the god has turned his face. A phrase found only once. Etched into the back of a ceremonial drum unearthed in 1893 and immediately lost in transport. You feel the absence now? Same hollow felt in the breath chambers? The god is not here. But his residue remains. Like the scent of ozone before a storm, you step away. The plaza shifts. The sound returns. No longer subtle. A wind spirals suddenly, lifting feathers from the dust. Feathers you hadn't seen before. They swirl around you, forming patterns you can't interpret, but your body reacts. Goose flesh, heart stuttering, ears popping. The air folds in. You kneel without choosing to, your hands open. Something invisible presses down upon you. Not malevolent, but heavy, as if being remembered by a forgotten presence. Then, silence. The feathers fall, and the stone eyes resume their tears. You rise. But something of you stays behind. A thought, a breath, a memory. You cannot hold them all now. You're filling with something not yours. Or perhaps was always yours, and only now returning. A final image flashes unbidden. A god, seated in a temple of sky. Blindfolded by his own feathers, mouth sealed not with wax but with silence. His tears do not fall, they rise. You stagger into daylight. But the rain still clings to your skin. You travel south, not by map, but by instinct, chasing wind and dreams. Roads blur into dust. Villages pass like shadows. Somewhere in the highlands where mist thickens like prayer and trees hum beneath their bark. You arrive at a ruin not marked on any survey. The stones do not resemble Teotihuacan, nor Cholula, nor any known site. They spiral instead of stack, curve instead of climb. A forgotten geometry. You pass under an arch woven from branches and obsidian flakes. No writing, no offering, only wind. They say she lived here, the one who spoke his dreams. She was blind from birth, though her eyes glowed faintly green.
Ow.
No one remembers her name, only that she was called Ixcaleta by those who feared her and Mother of Plumes by those who knelt. Her hut, now devoured by moss and time, was once the site of a forbidden rite. She did not pray to Quetzalcoatl. She did not worship. She listened. You find remnants, a circle of stones blackened by fire, feathers burned halfway and arranged in spirals. In the center, a shallow pit filled with ashes and fragments of bone. Not human, not animal, not identifiable. Scattered among them, shards of obsidian carved into tongues, each slightly different in shape, as if made to replicate specific breaths. A set of lungs dismembered into syllables. The villagers, if any remain, do not speak of her, but the wind does. It rushes suddenly as you enter the circle, then stills. You kneel at the ashes and hear it. A whisper not in your ears, but behind your eyes. He dreams beneath the feathers. His wings beat once every 1,000 years. The oracle's fire ritual, described only in the margins of a condemned friar's diary, involved breathing in the smoke of burned feathers inscribed with unspeakable glyphs. The flames were said to sing, not in music, but in memory. The oracle would inhale, and for hours she would scream words no one had taught her. Prophecies, they believed. But some said curses. She once described a future where gods returned not as saviors but as echoes, reflections with no source. Her final vision, written in blood on rabbit hide, remains untranslated. The hide was stolen in 1934 from a Jesuit archive. Its contents survive only as a brief line quoted by the thief before his disappearance. He weeps not for the dead, but for the faithful. You sit in the fire circle. The wind breathes once more. You hold one of the obsidian tongues to your lips, unsure why. You exhale through it. The forest blinks. The ground beneath you hums. The ashes rise in a slow spiral, forming shapes, not figures but words, ancient and glowing, pulsing like breath. They drift around you, feathers of light. Then you see her, not in flesh, not in vision, but in presence. The oracle stands in the shadow between trees. Her eyes are closed. Her mouth is open, but no sound. From her throat, feathers pour like smoke. She turns towards you. Freeze. She raises her hand and points to the pit. You look. The ashes are gone. In their place, a mirror-polished obsidian. But unlike the others, it reflects nothing. Not even darkness. It is not a surface. It is a wound. You reach for it. The moment your fingers touch the edge, a wind explodes outward. The trees bend. The fire pit bursts into lightless flame. Your breath, your very breath, is torn from you. You cannot inhale. You do not panic. You wait, and the wind returns. But it does not fill your lungs. It enters your mind. You hear the voice of the god dreaming. I am not gone. You have only awakened my shadow. Then, silence. The flame dies. The mirror fractures. The oracle vanishes. And in the place where the ashes once lay, A single feather floats, untouched by fire, glowing faintly and possibly from within. You pick it up. It is warm. It breathes. You leave the forest with the feather still pulsing in your grip, its warmth no longer comforting but expectant. The wind tugs at your limbs like a child urging you towards something half-remembered. You follow without question, guided not by direction but by rhythm. The rhythm of breath, of footsteps, of ancient drums no longer struck by living hands. Days pass as a blur. Your dreams no longer belong to you. In the high plateaus of ancient Tula, capital of the Toltecs, the air thins. It is here, among basalt giants and silent plazas, that a plague once began. But not of blood or fever, of devotion. You pass between towering statues known as the Atlanteans. Warrior figures carved with obsidian eyes and feathered headdresses. They do not guard. They observe, they judge. Local lore tells of a white jaguar that entered the temple of Quetzalcoatl one morning in the year 896 AD. The beast made no sound. It walked past the guards, past the priests, and lay calmly at the foot of the altar. It blinked once, and then the priests began to scream, not in pain, in language. Unknown syllables poured from their mouths like water from a broken dam. They clawed at their own tongues, not in madness, but in awe. They burned their own scrolls, saying the ink no longer sufficed. And within a week, the entire priesthood was silent. Not from fear, from transformation. No. You stand at the remains of that altar now. No signs mark it. No visitors linger here. Only broken stone, blackened, as though fire once poured from the heavens.
Ash.
No bones, only claw marks, perfectly preserved, circling the stone in spirals. Spirals of worship or warning. You kneel. The feather in your hand twitches. There are no records of the jaguar's departure. Some said it spoke once. A single word none dared repeat. Others said it left through a crack in the stone. One monk believed it never left at all, that it became the temple. That those who walk inside now enter the mouth of the divine. You step forward. The air shifts. Not grows colder, but sharper, as if the molecules themselves were aware. The stone walls shimmer faintly, not with light, but with meaning. Your vision blurs, and suddenly they are not walls, they are glyphs. Not etched, but alive, swimming like serpents beneath the surface of time. You understand none of them, and yet you feel understood. At the heart of the temple lies a pit, dry, empty, but sacred. This is where the priests once cast their own words, surrendering language to the god. Ritual tongues. Obsidian blades carved into the shapes of consonants were dropped one by one into the pit. The more they surrendered, the more they were filled with what they called the breath beneath breath. One forbidden belief, recorded in a Jesuit-esque diary later marked non decet legger, fit to read, suggested that the white jaguar was no animal at all, but Quetzalcoatl in feral form. Not a god of wind and wisdom, but of involution, turning inward until one becomes pure breath, pure silence, pure recursion. The god is jaguar, dreaming the world into reversal. A cracked codex fragment in the Museo Nacional holds a single cryptic line beneath a sketch of the beast. He came not to eat flesh, but memory. The air grows heavy. You drop the feather. It does not fall.
Ow!
It hovers midair, spinning. Your body goes rigid. Your breath ceases, not by force, by choice. Something within you recognizes this. Then, behind you, a sound. Not footsteps, purring, low, rumbling, not threatening. Familiar. You do not turn. The warmth at your back increases. Soft breath grazes your neck. Then a voice, not in your ear, but in your chest. What would you forget to become holy? The feather drops. You inhale sharply. You are alone, or you are not. The wind is still watching. The pit before you glows faintly now, and within it, a single spiral scratched into the stone. It shifts as you watch, coiling tighter, pulling your gaze inward. And you understand the jaguar was never meant to be feared. It was the god's question given fur and fangs. And every civilization it passed through answered with silence. Night finds you in the ruins of a monastery built from stones that once belonged to the temples of Quetzalcoatl. The colonial facade is crumbling, its iron bells rusted, its icons pocked by time and moss. Yet beneath the frescoes of saints and martyrs, beneath the incense-stained vaults, the walls still remember who they once served. You can feel it. Not in sight or sound, but in resistance. The structure fights its new identity. Something ancient remains curled in its foundations. You move through a hallway once used by friars, now silent, save for the whisper of your feet on worn tiles. Torchlight from a broken sconce flickers against the wall, illuminating not scripture, but graffiti. Spirals, feathers, coiled serpents scratched into the plaster. Not vandalism. Persistence. The god refuses to be erased. You enter a library locked for centuries. The door was broken recently, not by scholars, but something older, quieter. Inside, ash clings to every surface. Blackened shelves, melted candles, the scent of scorched ink. The fire must have been absolute. And yet, on the far wall, untouched by flame, rests a glyph painted in ochre. The serpent, mouth open, feathered tail wrapped in a spiral. Beneath it, no words, only a handprint, burned into stone. Theories abound. Priests claimed Quetzalcoatl's image could not be cleansed through fire, that every time they torched a carving or shattered a glyph, another appeared. On walls, in books. In dreams, one monk claimed to have seen it inside a wafer during Mass. Another found it in frost on a chapel window. A third saw it carved into his own fingernail after confessing doubt. All were silenced, but the image remained. You pick through the remains of manuscripts, careful not to inhale the sacred ash. Most are destroyed. Histories, genealogies, forbidden codices. But one fragment remains. A page curled but unburnt, written in Nahuatl and Latin. The ink is still wet. You read. He whom you cannot name shall write himself upon your breath. Your mouth goes dry. The air thickens. The flame gutters. The walls shudder. You turn and see it. The glyph again. Behind you. But this one moves. The serpent's body coils slowly, its tail twisting into script. The words aren't in any tongue, you know. Yet you understand. You're your name rewritten, not pronounced, unmade. You drop the page. There's a mural beneath the soot. You scrub at it with your sleeve. Slowly, the image emerges. A scene of fire, colonizers with torches approaching a temple. Above, a great feathered serpent descends, not to destroy, but to mourn. His eyes weep obsidian tears onto the heads of burning priests. A line of glyphs trails beneath the painting. Only one has survived the fire clearly. Teotihuacan, I see, knocks a kettle, the flower that refuses the ground. A forbidden belief lingers among indigenous communities, never written, only spoken. That Quetzalcoatl survives not in worship, but in resistance. That every attempt to erase him feeds his breath. That each burning only makes the feather brighter. You leave the library. The glyph follows you, not visually, but in the sound of your footsteps, in the weight of your shoulders, in the rhythm of your lungs. Outside, the stars pulse low and gold. No moon tonight. You breathe in and see your breath glow faintly green. Somewhere behind you, the ash swirls, and on the blackened wall, the serpent coils tighter. You climb higher now, up into the spine of the Sierra Madre, where the trees grow thin and the wind sharpens like obsidian. The mountains here have no name on official maps. They bear only whispers. Names in wind, names in echo, names without vowels. You walk with the feeling of being expected, not watched, waited for. A cave awaits you near the summit, a mouth in the rock, wide and cracked with age. No shrines mark it, no altars greet you, and yet every stone leans inward, as if bowing. Oh. This is where the voice was last heard. Not a sermon, not a prayer, but a language, not spoken, exhaled. You enter the cave. Inside, the air is different, dense, charged. Every breath hums with static. Every step draws up flakes of mica that glitter like ground stars. There is no path, only resonance. You find your way not by sight, but by sound. The subtle shifts in the tone of your own breathing. Higher notes to the left, lower to the right. You follow the music your lungs produce, and it guides you inward. The walls begin to change, from rough stone to smooth spirals carved by hands long dead or never born. Symbols line the surfaces, not glyphs, not letters. Shapes of air, spirals, crescents, soft wedges that seem to move when you blink. You reach out and your fingertips brush stone and something else, something soft, as if air had been etched into the walls themselves. It was here, centuries ago, that a monk sought the god's original tongue. A Jesuit named Fray de Alvear, obsessed with decoding the divine phoneme whispered of in Mesoamerican legend. He believed Quetzalcoatl did not teach words, but breath. That the language of the god was not meant to be spoken with lips, but lungs, diaphragm, windpipe. He came here with a flute, a knife, and a notebook. Only the flute was found. His final notes, retrieved from a sealed clay vessel and now hidden in a private collection. Read, "To pronounce his name properly, I must no longer need a tongue." You reach the center of the cave. A basin lies at your feet, filled not with water, but with tiny bones. Hummingbird bones, hollow and perfect, arranged like a constellation. Around the edge, obsidian mouthpieces, not quite flutes, not quite whistles, instruments of breath. Each one tuned not to a pitch, but to an emotion. You pick one up, it hums before you even blow into it. It recognizes your presence. You place it to your lips. The moment your breath enters, the cave responds. The walls shimmer. A low tone builds, vibrating your ribs. The sound doesn't echo, it loops, reverberates, multiplies, until the cave becomes your chest, and your chest becomes the cave. You feel words begin to rise. Not thoughts, not language, but impulses, images, memory, fragments, serpents coiling through canopies, a feather falling through bloodless air, God seated cross-legged, breathing stars in and out of existence. You drop the mouthpiece, but the sound continues. The walls begin to speak. You understand nothing and everything. The phrases form without structure, words made of air and pressure, but their meaning is clear. You remember only what you are allowed to. I remember what you were before. Your hands shake, your breath stutters, feather in your pocket grows warm. Draw it out. It glows faintly, its edge vibrating with each syllable the cave utters. It begins to float upward, twisting with the rhythm of the sound. The mystery of the wind language, often dismissed as metaphor by scholars, has never been solved. Some believe it was a set of tones used to communicate in battle. Others suggest it was a myth invented to avoid colonizer detection. But the last living speaker of Nahuatl, in a remote Sierra village, once told a linguist, "Our gods didn't teach us to speak. They taught us to breathe." Words came later. You press your back to the wall. Spiral shapes begin to move again, forming patterns that mimic breath. Inhale, exhale, hold, release. You follow, not consciously. Instinctively, as you match the rhythm, the cave grows quiet. Not from silence, from understanding. And in that stillness, one final phrase vibrates from the stone. "When breath returns to breath, I will no longer need a name." You exhale slowly. The feather falls into your hand. It is no longer warm. It breathes for you now. You descend the mountain with lungs no longer your own. The air tastes different now, not of oxygen, but of meaning. Each breath a phrase, each exhale a confession whispered to a sky you no longer understand. The feather lies across your palm like a sliver of moonlight, no longer pulsing, but waiting. And you understand with the certainty of one chosen not to remember, but to fulfill, that your path must follow the heavens. In the year 1007, a star vanished. It is recorded in no codex, no calendar, no European manuscript. But in the oral traditions of a dozen Nahua clans, the story remains. They speak of a light in the western sky, neither sun nor moon nor wandering planet, a steady green star, brighter than Venus, visible even at midday. For 13 years it lingered, unmoving, unblinking. And then, on the 13th night of the 13th cycle, it disappeared without ceremony. No eclipse, no tremor, only absence. They called it sea, Tochin, the sleeping fish. The priests called it Teotihuacan, the mask of the god. Pilgrims walked toward it not as astronomers, but as penitents. They said it hovered above a plateau beyond the reach of cities, a place now erased from every known map. You follow no road, only fragments. In stolen pages, in whispered prayers disguised as lullabies, in stars misaligned just slightly from modern charts. The trail leads you deep into the desert, to a place where compasses refuse direction and no birds fly overhead. There the air grows still, time unwinds, even your shadow hesitates. And then you see it. Not a city, not a ruin, an emptiness. A perfectly circular depression in the land, lined with stones the color of dried blood. In its center, a spiral carved into glassy rock. Obsidian not formed by lava, but by something else. Meteor impact, scholars would later guess, but no crater scars the earth. It's only symmetry, only invitation. At the center stands a single stone pillar, 6 feet high, feathered with lichen and etched with spirals. Upon its face, a carved feather pointing upward. Beneath it, in glyphs older than Nahuatl, a line that scholars debate endlessly. Only those who forget their names may follow. You do not hesitate. You step into the spiral. The moment your foot touches the first ring, the wind stops. The sun dims, your breath catches, and the spiral moves, not the stone, the space. You are no longer standing on ground, but in a memory. The desert flickers away. The sky turns black, lit not by stars, but by pulsing glyphs that rearrange with every heartbeat. Around you, silhouettes of pilgrims drift, eyes wide, mouths silent. They walk not toward the pillar, but into it. You approach. Your reflection appears, warped in the surface of the stone, except it is not you. It is the you before breath, before form, coil of wind in the shape of question. Theological records recovered from a now-collapsed monastery speak of this place in riddles. We call it Teotihuacan, the place of light that walks away. A portal, perhaps, a test, a punishment. Or a whisper left behind when Quetzalcoatl shed his final name. One friar described it thus: a field where language forgets itself and returns to wind. You reach the pillar. The carved feather begins to glow faintly. The glyphs above your head spiral inward. You touch the stone, and you vanish. Not bodily. Your certainty is the first to go. Then your thoughts, then your boundaries. You fall upward, into a tunnel of breath. A single phrase follows you. He waits not to return, but to be remembered differently. When you awaken, you lie on sand. The pillar is gone. The spiral is erased. Above you, the sky is starless. But in your hand, the feather remains. And in the wind, you hear him breathing. You awaken beneath a starless dome. The feather still gripped in your palm, though it no longer pulses, no longer breathes for you. It now listens. Every movement you make feels observed, as though the sky itself has grown ears. The air is unnaturally quiet, not silent, merely waiting. And you once seeker now carry something heavier than understanding: expectation. You walk east, toward what was once the horizon. You do not eat. You do not thirst. Your breath sustains you more than food ever did. In your chest, something has changed. Each inhalation tastes of stone, of memory, of gods that once wore wind-like skin. You walk through a place unnamed until you see it. A pyramid that is not a pyramid. A shape warped by forgetting, its angles off by degrees that unsettle the eye. It should not exist. And yet it does. This is the temple without sacrifice. It stands alone on a raised hill, scorched by sun, untouched by time. It is said that here, on a morning lost to the world's calendars, the sun rose, then vanished mid-climb. Not with fire, nor smoke, nor cloud, but with an absence so complete, it inverted belief. An eclipse without shadow, without heart. The priests gathered. The knives lay untouched. No drum sounded. No blood was spilled. No one moved. For a moment stretching longer than time permits, the sun simply stopped, above the horizon, unmoving and unreflected. They say Quetzalcoatl turned his face that day. Not in rage, not in withdrawal, but in mourning. The world no longer knew how to worship without sacrifice, and he no longer wished to be seen through blood. You ascend the slope. The steps are jagged, unfinished. Carvings of hands reaching upward mark the base. They become fainter with each level, until at the summit they vanish entirely. No altar waits here. No image. Only a flat stone floor, smooth as breath, warm to the touch despite the wind. In the center, a hollow, no deeper than your hand, a depression, as though something had once rested here or escaped. Theological debates center around this event, the sunless dawn. Some say it was a solar misalignment, an illusion produced by smoke or volcanic ash. Others believe it was a coordinated rebellion, a priestly demonstration against the rising cult of blood. Yet none can explain the after. For years following the event, records go blank. Entire codices bear gaps in chronology. Spiritual calendars skip cycles. One glyph, repeated across 3 regions in the same decade, simply reads, "The breath held too long." You kneel beside the hollow. The feather in your hand begins to twitch, not with life, but with restraint, as though holding something in. You place it into the depression. Sound escapes the earth. A low note, pure, endless, not music, not thunder. A hum made of waiting. The sky above begins to shift, not darken, shift. As though the dome were turning just slightly, revealing a seam between dimensions. You hear footsteps, dozens, hundreds, none visible. A wind rises from below. You stand. Round you shadows form. Not people, possibilities, shapes the world might have taken. You see temples built of breath, altars without knives, cities that bloomed through silence instead of conquest. And above them all, the god who never wished to be called God, Quetzalcoatl, not name but principle. Not power, but memory. A forgotten choice. You see him clearly now, not as man nor serpent, but breath-given form, a ripple, a voice before voice. And he is not weeping, he is waiting. A single thought enters your mind. I left because you chose noise. Then the feather lifts from the hollow. The eclipse returns. The sun vanishes again, but this time your heart continues. It beats louder than before, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the world inhales. Not for sacrifice, but for remembrance. You descend from the temple with the eclipse still fresh in your lungs. The air around you strangely lighter, yet stretched like skin pulled tight over ancient truths. The feather now hovers beside you as you walk. It does not float, it follows. And the wind, long your companion, begins to murmur a new language. Not Nahuatl, not Latin. Something older or newer. Something that might be both. You do not remember choosing your path, but you find yourself at the threshold of a forgotten mission deep in the colonial interior. A ruined chapel swallowed by jungle vines and theological betrayal. The door is broken. The cross above it lies face down in the dirt. Yet the scent of incense lingers, impossibly preserved. Inside, frescoes peeled from the walls. Saints with hollow eyes. Martyrs whose blood no longer runs red, but green. But at the altar, half concealed beneath flaking gold and soot, is a vision few have seen and fewer survived remembering. A mural, Christ crucified but not alone. Beneath his feet coiled, rising, whispering. A feathered serpent, emerald eyes turned not to heaven but to him. Their gazes lock, one nailed, one breathing. One sacrificed, one eternal. You step forward, heart pounding with something too complex to be fear. The mural is unsigned. No date, no patron. Only a single phrase carved behind the altar in both Latin and Nahuatl. Lacvider illi quem Roma, negavit. In a tel tatoa. He speaks to the one Rome denied. The water speaks. It is known only from a single Jesuit report, quickly condemned and locked in the Vatican's forbidden archives. In it, the friar describes a Nahua priest who refused conversion, yet came nightly to the chapel to pray, not to Christ, but to the serpent in Christ's shadow. He claimed to dream of a God who wept for the crucified, not out of sorrow, but recognition. They nailed him for the same reason, he said, because he spoke without needing sacrifice. Friar went mad, but not before writing a final note. I saw the God's mouth move beneath the altar. I heard the wind say, Amen. You kneel. The feather spins beside you now, moving with rhythm, with purpose. The air inside the chapel thickens, but not with heat. With history, with converging echoes. Beneath the altar, something stirs. A floor panel loosens, lift it, revealing a narrow chamber where bones lie arranged in spirals. Human ribs, long and thin, interwoven with Quetzal plumes. And in the center, a crucifix made not of wood, but obsidian and jade. The body upon it is no man. It is a serpent, crowned in thorns of wind. You understand? This was not heresy. It was memory reconfigured. A belief too dangerous for dogma. A truth too delicate for empire. You recall a mystery never solved by theology. Why the earliest Nahua converts occasionally referred to Christ not as El Hijo de Dios, but as El Que Se Fue. Why indolor? He who left and returned in sorrow. No explanation was ever found, till now, because they did not see to gods, as they saw one. Misnamed, divided, crucified twice, Quetzalcoatl did not vanish. He was rewritten. Your hand reaches for the crucifix, and the chapel groans. Dust spills from the walls. Vines outside tremble as if wind passed through stone. From beneath the altar, a voice issues forth, and breath alone. I never asked for blood. I asked for memory. You rise. And every candle, long unlit, ignites with green flame. The mural serpent begins to move, slowly coiling around the figure on the cross, not to devour, to lift, to carry him down. The altar splits, the chapel exhales. Outside, the sky ripples like wind over feathers. Inside, the name Quetzalcoatl breathes itself into the room. It is not denied. You emerge from the chapel at dusk, and the jungle bows in stillness. The crucifix of obsidian remains in your hand, though you never recall lifting it. The feather has rejoined it, wrapped tight around the cross like a serpent that finally remembers its own skin. You are no longer following a trail. You are walking within one. Every step forward folds the world behind you. Every breath curls deeper into memory, not your own. A small building waits at the edge of the clearing. Adobe walls collapsed inward, a roof made of rotted thatch and stars. The sign above the door is gone, but the glyph carved into the frame remains. A coiled feather swallowing its tip. Inside, a table of stone. And upon it, a single book, bound in serpent skin, black as sleep, etched with metallic green ink that flickers like breath when you get too close. It is cool to the touch. Too cool. The air around it hums, a frequency below sound, like the vibration of something vast moving far away. You open it, not gently, but with reverence born of terror. The first page bears no words, only a painted feather, so detailed you expect it to lift and fly. The second page bears text, Nahuatl, Latin, and something else. A language of curves and slashes, unreadable to the eye, but felt instantly in the lungs. You read aloud without knowing how. In darkness, he turned backward through his own breath, and in the unmaking of his name, he became wind. The Codex of the Black Feathers, a work of cursed renown. Rumors of its existence persist in fringe circles of theological archaeology. Its contents banned not only by religious order, but by common sense. It is said to contain visions, not history. To write itself when left open beneath starlight. To erase itself in the hands of the unworthy. It was last catalogued in a Spanish fortress-turned-library along the Gulf Coast in 1764. That same night, the library burned. The only survivor spoke a single sentence before leaping from a tower. He wrote his name across my breath. Your hands continue to turn pages. They do not obey you anymore. One page depicts Quetzalcoatl not as man, not serpent, but as a spiral of feathers hovering above a battlefield. Around him, warriors lay down their weapons, not in defeat, but in confusion, as though their purpose was unspoken. The next page shows him drowning, not in water, in names. Each syllable carves into him like blades, Eheketl, Tapiltzin, Lord of Dawn. He who came from the sea, he bleeds syllables until nothing remains but breath, and then, the final section, a prophecy. Written not in ink but in burned parchment, stained with oil and heat, as if scorched into existence by a god himself. Read it aloud. When the breath is no longer borrowed, and the last feather sings without lungs, He will return not as storm or sun, but as silence. A gust of wind tears through the building. The codex slams shut. The candles, unlit until now, burst into emerald flame. And in their glow, you see the walls change. No longer cracked adobe, they now pulse with spirals, feathers, eyes. From the shadows, a figure steps forward, robed in black feathers, face unseen. Voice absent, in their hand. Another codex. Blank. They offer it to you. You do not reach. But it is already in your hand. Pages flutter open. Blank. But then a sentence begins to write itself. In your handwriting, not on the page. In your breath. Understand, the next codex is not for reading, it is for becoming. You exhale. The book writes on. You descend again, not by path or gravity, but through a thinning of reality. The codex clings to your ribs, no longer a book, but a breathing organ, silent, pulsing, inscribed with every breath you take. The landscape changes with each step. No longer jungle, no longer mountain, now stone, cold, geometric, deliberate. You walk into the underbelly of the Feathered Serpent's pyramid at Teotihuacan, but not the one you knew, a deeper level. A level the archaeologists never recorded, or could not. It was first discovered in 2003, then sealed again by unspoken agreement. Beneath the temple of the Feathered Serpent, a tunnel was found, mapped, unlit, lined with metallic spheres and veins of mercury. The official report claimed ritual offerings, ancient sewage systems, or tombs. But the images leaked tell a different story. Tunnels shaped like wind, chambers without doors, sarcophagi the size of children, arranged in perfect spirals, and no bones. You enter this place now, not with tools, with memory. The air is thick, not damp, heavy, like lungs pressed from within. A tunnel opens before you, slick with condensation that drips upward. Walls breathe. The feather floats beside you once more, no longer glowing, but vibrating like a tuning fork. The codex within you pulses harder. You pass through chambers that shift as you enter. One is filled with statues of men without faces, each holding a mirror. Another contains walls that repeat your footsteps milliseconds after you make them. Echoes reversed, time unthreaded, corridor of flame that does not burn. Then the main chamber. At its center lies a pit, a basin of mercury, still as glass. This is where the unsolved mystery resides. The ancient priests sealed this place, not to protect the treasures, but to contain what was no longer sleeping. You look down. Beneath the surface of the mercury, shapes swim. Feathers, eyes, your own face, then his, but not as man, not as serpent. As possibility, a spiral of breath made visible. He coils and recoils with the rhythm of your lungs. The mirror does not reflect, it remembers. Scholars have long puzzled over the presence of mercury. Rare, toxic, alchemical. Found in Egyptian tombs, Chinese pyramids. And here, always where the gods were supposed to lie. But never as a preservative, always as a veil. One fringe theory, buried in a dissertation discredited before publication, suggested the mercury was not metal at all, but thought. Liquid memory. Divine runoff from a god too vast to contain his own reflection. You kneel. The feather floats down and rests upon the mercury's surface. No ripple, only stillness. Then words begin to form on the surface, not scratched. Exhaled. I remember you. The mercury stirs. A spiral begins. You feel your bones vibrate, your teeth hum. The codex within you starts to bleed ink across your lungs. Every name you've ever carried dissolves on your tongue. You lean closer. The feather's gone. You look up, and the ceiling of the chamber has vanished. Above you, not sky, not stone, but breath, moving, folding, breathing. You are inside him now, inside the silence that breathes between worlds, and he speaks again, not to your mind, to your breath. Do not speak my name. Breathe it. You inhale. The mercury swells upward, a column of glistening memory, and for a single moment, you see every face that has ever invoked him. Peasant, child, conqueror, heretic, and yourself, endlessly reflected in every one. You exhale, and the column collapses. The chamber is empty. The codex within you is now unreadable, because it has been written. Its title is your breath. You return from beneath the earth with lungs full of silence. The city breathes without knowing. The streets of the present roll forward, their noise oblivious to what stirs beneath. Cars pass. Children laugh. Vendors shout beneath plastic tarps. None know that the god is breathing again, that you carry his breath like a dormant storm folded into your chest. But somewhere, out of sight, out of time, something has changed. You are drawn now to a room that should not exist. A private archive hidden within a national museum, behind a door never opened, catalogued under no name. You pass through its hallway not as visitor, but as memory, unchallenged, unseen. The corridor is too narrow, the walls too smooth. The door appears not at the end, but halfway on the left, framed by no signage, no lock. Inside, a single case of glass, and within it, the feather rests atop red velvet like a relic. Long as your forearm, iridescent green, with tips of twilight blue. No dust, no decay. A museum label rests beneath it, typed in faded ink. Item hashtag C-IX 433 provenance. Unverified material. Organic condition. Preserved notes. Unchanged since entry in 1184. Do not touch. You draw closer, your own feather. The one that guided you has long since vanished, dissolved into your breath. But this one is still here, intact, waiting. It does not hum, but it listens. You sense it. The air around the case is thicker, like humidity wrapped around meaning. This is the last trace of him the world accepts. The final thread the official records cannot explain. They have tested it, carbon dated it, attempted to replicate it. The pigment resists analysis. The fibers do not rot. The proteins refuse decomposition. They call it a fraud. They call it a mystery. But the archivists, the ones who sweep at night, who do not wear lab coats or badges, they whisper. They say it arrived by itself. No courier, no donation. Simply appeared one morning in the sealed case, behind glass that had never been opened. And that, ever since, no spider has dared to build a web in the room where it rests. You stand before it now. The glass fogs slightly from your breath, but the feather does not move. Not yet. There is a presence here. Not Quetzalcoatl, not entirely, but something left behind. A spiritual molting, a residue. It's the breath after speech, the spiral after ending. You reach out, not to touch, but to breathe. Slowly, deliberately, you inhale. And the air curls around your teeth with the taste of stone, of ash, of green. You exhale toward the feather, and it quivers. The light above flickers. Your reflection in the glass stutters. You hear a sound, so soft it might be nothing. A rustle like leaves or wings. The feather lifts, not fully. It's just enough to acknowledge. You understand the message. You are now the case. It's the container, the vessel. He does not need temples now, or pyramids, or names carved into stone. He needs lungs, yours. An unsolved theological riddle has puzzled fringe scholars for decades. Why does his story never end? The answer waits here, because the story is not written, it is breathed. And it begins again each time someone forgets how to speak and learns to inhale with reverence. You turn away. The feather settles back into stillness, but it is no longer alone. It has remembered itself. So have you. Night settles over the archive like a shroud of unspoken names. Outside, neon flickers on wet pavement. Distant laughter rises from the bones of the city, and the future hums blindly forward. But inside, in that sealed, invisible room, time has curled in on itself. A single feather rests beneath glass, unmoved. You walk away from it, yet feel it behind your ribs, coiled and watching. Not as an object, not as a memory, but as a question. What now breathes through you? You've seen what the world forgot, that gods do not vanish. They are rewritten, misnamed, reflected in silence, folded into rituals that no longer understand themselves. Quetzalcoatl did not die. He migrated, from wind to whisper, from altar to archive, from feather to lung, and now, into you. You will not dream the same. Your breath will not be innocent. You will hear language differently, how it folds around breath like skin around bone. You will see spirals where others see symmetry. And when the wind shifts, you'll know it is not moving air, but an old god stretching. So you inhale, slowly, and the room around you pauses. Not because you are sacred, because you remember what it is to be silent in the presence of something older than fire. I've turned every page. You have walked through echoes. You've forgotten your name and found something truer beneath it. He is still gone, but only if breath remains meaningless. If you speak, he may scatter again. But if you listen deeply, he may begin to rewrite the world once more. There is no altar, there is no blood, only this, a feather, breath, a story too sacred for language. There are more gods, are always more gods.